Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Miami Torah Center. It is our honor and privilege to have with us Rabbi Dr. Aryeh Blum, and we are all so excited to hear from him. B'ezrat Hashem, this is the first of many. Rabbi Dr. Aryeh Blum is a psychotherapist. He practices in Miami as well as in Hollywood. So please put your hands together for Rabbi Dr. Aryeh Blum.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I just have to say I haven't finished medical school yet, and that's because I haven't applied yet. So the doctor we're still waiting on, but just give me some time. Give me some time. First of all, I want to thank the Miami Torah Center for hosting this. This is my first time here, and this is absolutely beautiful. And looking at it, at everyone here is so beautiful, and I'm really very, very, very privileged and very, very honored to speak here. So thank you very, very much. And I also want to thank the Goldsteins, because without them, this could not have happened. I also want to particularly thank Rivka Goldstein. Yes, absolutely. Does everyone know who Rivka is? Because Rivka came up with the title for this lecture, and I'm very grateful that she did. The lecture is Anxiety, Anger, and Addiction, a Crisis in Our Times. And I'm very grateful for that, because it reminded me of a story. It's a true story. A few years back, I was running a group therapy, and there was a fellow. He really didn't want to be there. He felt forced, compelled to be there by his family, I suppose. He was sitting to my left. He didn't want to be there. And the rules of the therapy group were that there's no eating in the room. No eating, no chewing candy, no gum. You can drink water. Water's allowed, but there's no eating in the room. Addicts have a very difficult time following the rules, so I feel compelled to help them with that. And I asked him to please swallow it, throw it out. And he looks at me, stares me down. And we can't begin the group until he's compliant. So I ask him again, please spit it out, throw it away. He says, no. He gives me darts in his eyes. So I said, okay, well, if you don't want to spit it out or throw it out, I can have one of the behavioral techs come in and they can escort you out if you'd like. And he became enraged right away. He just burst out in anger, and he actually threw a chair across the room, and he flung some slurs at me and exited the room ungracefully and slammed the door. He was none too happy. A few days later, he was in my caseload, he was my client. A few days later, he comes in for the individual session, and he's still steaming. Why the heck can't I chew candy? I said very calmly, well, why do you want to chew? Why do you want to have candy? Why do you want to chew gum? He says, well, I got a lot of anxiety, and it calms me down. It calms me down. So I said, well, that's actually the reason I don't want you to chew candy. Here you are, you're chewing gum and eating candy, and clearly it hasn't done enough to calm you down. So I actually want you to be anxious. What do you mean? No, I want you to be anxious. I want you to bring that anxiety, bring it to the therapy. Bring it to the group. Let us work on it. If you don't bring it, if you don't come to the group, to the therapy, there's nothing to work on. And clearly this is an issue by you. So let's work on it. I said, fine, I guess that makes sense. But I'm not going to relapse because of candy. Remember that line. I'm not going to relapse because of candy. So we start talking about his last relapse. He went on, it's called a run, several months of heroin. And I asked him, how did this all start? It started because he was triggered by anesthesia. He had been given anesthesia, and that really is sort of just what started him on this terrible run of heroin. And he's a young young kid, 19 years old, anesthesia. What are you getting anesthesia for? Well, I had a lot of surgery. I said, surgery? What kind of surgery are you getting? Well, I had a lot of facial surgery. Facial surgery? What happened? Said, well, I had a lot of cavities. Cavities? What are you getting cavities for? Said, well, my dentist told me I was eating too much candy. The true stories are the best. The true stories are the best. But I'm not going to relapse because of candy. Thank God, I am very blessed to deal with many different kinds of conditions, many different kinds of people, and one day maybe I'll write a book on the stories that I hear. They're wonderful, they're beautiful, and they're all lessons. So tonight I would like to talk a little bit about the problem, and I'd like to talk, of course, about some solutions to the problem. And I want you to understand we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. We're just barely scratching the surface of these topics. They're very important topics, very deep topics, very important topics to each one of us here. So we're just going to scratch the surface. But I want to talk about the problem, and I want to talk about the solution. And I want to let you know that the problem actually is twofold. The problem, first and foremost, is the reality of the prevalence and the conditions of anxiety and anger and addiction and many other either disorders or things that just make us uncomfortable, that just impinge upon our quality of life. That's one problem. But later on, I want to get to another problem, and that is the suffering, and it's usually done alone. People suffer through these. They suffer in silence. We don't know. They don't tell. And the suffering alone is just as bad as the condition of anxiety, the condition of addiction, the condition of anger. So let's start off talking about anxiety. Just some statistic for you. 1 in 5 people suffer from some kind of anxiety which imposes upon their life. 1 in 5 people. So look around. Don't count, because you can't count Jews, but don't count every 5th person, okay? 1 out of every 5 of us right over here suffers right around you from anxiety, okay? And those are just what's reported. Who knows how many suffer alone, okay? Of those who suffer from some sort of anxiety, 25%, 1 in 4, suffer from moderate to severe impairment of anxiety. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of people suffering. Anxiety can come in the form of disorders, OCD, general anxiety disorder, GAD, social anxiety, can come in the form of PTSD, fears, phobias. It's a very, very, very big topic. Anxiety is found in women in far greater numbers than men. Don't worry, men will get their due when you talk about anger, because as it turns out, men get angry in far greater numbers than women. So somehow the universe balances out. Let's talk about some causes of anxiety. Anxiety can essentially be split up into 2 categories. Let's talk about the first one first. And the first one is pathological anxiety. That's one approach to anxiety. And the pathological anxiety takes the form of, 2. One is stress from relationships, stress from finances, stress from works, stress from in-laws, outlaws, okay? Stress, all kinds of stress. Kids, yeah? Sorry, Gildo Bunnan. We get anxiety from raising children. It's not easy. There's no manual. Chronic illness. It's something I deal a lot with, both professionally and personally. My daughter has type 1 juvenile diabetes. Okay? That I can tell you in our household, that my wife became a juvenile diabetic at 41 years old. I tried to comfort her. I said, look, you're getting younger. It's juvenile diabetes. Didn't work. But there's always a low gray level, just under the radar, of anxiety. always the worry, because her life is literally at all points in time in danger, in mortal danger. So there's always going to be some natural anxiety there. The point where it becomes impairing to one's life, that's the point where we need to seek help. The other kind, of course, is biological. It's chemical. It's in our body. Some people, there's just a chemical imbalance, and whether it's medications or vitamins or nutrition, exercise, it can help balance the body, and that's very important. That's a relatively easy fix. It turns out, though, that the medications for anxiety tend, at least in my opinion, anecdotally, tend not to work as well as the depression medications. I see that very often. So popping pills for anxiety tends not to be as effective to deal with anxiety. Really, talk therapy, psychoanalysis, group therapy is very useful for that. But then there's another kind of anxiety, and it's not pathological. It's another approach to anxiety, and that's called existential angst. Okay? And that is the anxiety that comes from existing. You see, the one kind of anxiety, okay, is brought about by external factors. In the case of a biological problem, imbalance, an internal factor. And it's considered a pathology, something that has to be corrected, has to be removed, has to be taken out, almost like a cancer. Existential anxiety you can't get rid of. It's built into existence. It's built into the fabric of existence. Some people have healthy ways of dealing with that angst, the anxiety of being, and some people don't. The ones who don't live very uncomfortably. Very, very uncomfortably. And they need to learn how to deal with these issues. For example, one of the great existential anxieties is death fear. And death fear does not mean afraid of dying. It's not what it means. Death fear is fear of the unknown. Every last person in this room has it. Whether you believe in an afterlife, don't believe in an afterlife, it doesn't matter. Every last person has a fear of the unknown, because the unknown, we don't belong there. The hidden things, that's up to God. We have no business in that realm. So we don't do very well there. And when we try to exist there, it tends not to work out very well. So that's existential anxiety. We have unhealthy ways of dealing with that. One is to develop this very, very erroneous and false sense of control. If you think about it, the things that we can control in our life are very, 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 very few and far between. I mean, honestly, we don't have control of our health. Anything can happen. We don't have control of our finances. Anything can happen. We don't have control of our spouses, our kids. We may think we do, and that's a very gratifying sort of comforting feeling until reality hits us in the face and says, no, you don't. You don't. And then we're confronted with anxiety, with angst built into existence. We have very precious little control over anything. Okay? The only control we really have is at any given moment, do we want to do what God wants us to do or not? Are we going to do it or not? That is pretty much the only thing that we have control over. It's very, very limited. Very, very limited. And thank God. Because when we try to play God, it doesn't really work very well. You know, I tried it. It doesn't work very well. I've seen others try it. They failed at it. You know. The consequences of anxiety are very, very, very well documented. The consequences to the body, I'll just list some: heart disease, respiratory issues, GI problems, lower mortality rates, insomnia, concentration. Of course, there are social consequences to anxiety: irritability, depression, anger, broken up marriages, friendships. A generally poor quality of life. And of course, it can lead, as a consequence, can lead to other disorders. It can lead to depression and addiction and coexisting disorders. Anxiety has a financial impact. Tremendous financial impact. You can't concentrate at work, you can't work. How much money are we pouring into the healthcare industry to deal with these issues? Maybe not so effectively. So there's a tremendous consequence to anxiety, and they're very, very well documented. And I'd like to talk about some Torah views on anxiety. So first I'm going to turn to, and there are so many examples, so many demonstrations of anxiety, sometimes dealt with well, sometimes not dealt with well, sometimes unavoidable. Sarah Imeinu, our great mother, she was a very, very special woman. She had a very, very high level of prophecy. In fact, according to our sages, her level of prophecy was greater even than her husband's. And in her vision, she saw that her husband, Avraham, was taking their son, Yitzchak, to be slaughtered as a korban, as a sacrifice to God. Not only did she see that he was taking to be slaughtered, in her vision, he actually was slaughtered. This is a deep concept. In the upper worlds, he was slaughtered. In the world that we live in, he wasn't. He was sort of in between worlds. The word Yitzchak is Ketz Chai. He was not in this world, not in that world. He was sort of in between. So in a sense, he kind of was made a sacrifice. She saw that he was slaughtered. Rashi, the great commentator, brings a medrash, a statement by the sages saying the following. Why did she expire? Why did she die? It was the shock of seeing her son slaughtered. Just a few moments ago, I talked about how anxiety decreases mortality. Well, there you have it. She was overwhelmed in a moment. Now, of course, there's a lot that goes into that because she also saw the future of the Jewish people disintegrating right in front of her eyes. So there was more than just her son at stake. But, simply stated, it's her son. And that's what she saw. She couldn't handle it. It was too much. Her soul departed. One of my favorite verses in the Torah, is regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. Moshe could multitask. Wow, could that man multitask? Not only could he multitask, he just accomplished everything. Just everything. Except he had a breaking point too. At a certain point, the Jews are not so well behaved. He can handle everything but the Jews. And let's put it that way. He's got everything covered but his flock. We're that difficult. And he complains to God. I guess, Hashem is his therapist. So he complains to his therapist. Of course, the one where all healing comes from anyways. He does the Jewish thing. And he makes the following statement. Lo uchal anochi levadi lases es ha'am hazeh ki koved mimeni. Says to God, I cannot bear this burden. And the key word over here is alone. Alone. I cannot bear this burden alone. Because this burden is more than I can handle. It's too much for me. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest man that ever lived, is demonstrating such incredible humility. How? He recognizes his limitations. He knows what he can and what he cannot accomplish. Moshe Rabbeinu knows how to delegate. When his father-in-law came and he said it's just too much, he listened. Moses listened to his father-in-law, to the one who had it all. He knew. I can't do it myself. Tremendous humility from the man who could do anything. Anything. Anxiety is kind of tricky because the stress that comes with it, we feel we can accomplish a lot. And everyone in this room is so accomplished. It's very deceptive because we can accomplish this thing and this thing. I can do that. And I can do that, 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 and I can do that. But in aggregate, when you put them all on the scale together, how well do you accomplish it? Are you sleeping at night? Are your relationships strained? Are you getting angry? Are you turning to unhealthy ways to cope? It's very deceptive. It's a half-truth. The truth is, I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this, but the truth also, the bigger picture is, I can't do it all. But we try. We certainly try. We have this kind of this false messiah that we've all bought into. Not all, but in Western culture we have. It's called what I call the Marlboro Man. The Marlboro Man, sure you know the Marlboro Man, he sits on the cigarette advertisement, he sits on his horse, stoically looking out at the world, nothing's going to faze him. I'm not sure if I can do a good look like that. I don't know. Nothing's going to faze him. He can handle everything. No emotions. It's just a fantasy. Nowhere in reality, and certainly nowhere in our higher reality of Torah, does that even exist. We're not supposed to do everything. We can't do everything. We turn to the one who can do everything, and if we're really humble and we listen, he'll send us the help we need. Usually it comes in the form of other people. I don't know of any great company that ever became successful because of one person. Not a single one. I want to bring another verse from Devarim. It says, "V'heser mimcha kol choili," that we're promised that God is going to remove from us all illness. All illness. The Talmud Yerushalmi says the following: what is illness? What are we talking about illness? We're talking about spleen? Headaches? What illness are we talking about? All illness. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, what is the illness that we're talking about, the holy that we're talking about? Zu ra'ayon, your thoughts. Your thoughts. Everything happens up here. Everything happens up here. The thoughts that we have contribute to tremendous illness, and this is particularly true in the case of anxiety. So let's look at how anxiety comes up in halacha. And again, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to talk about. It's so deep. We're just scratching the surface. We need to prioritize. We need to be able to figure out what's important, what's not important. A lot of times people who, especially people who are Bali Tshuva, who come, I'm a Bali Tshuva. I didn't grow up religious. Okay, I came back to the fold. Okay, so I remember my parents are sitting over here. I, for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to make it up to them. When I became, everything was important. Everything was important. The way I tied my shoes, everything had the import of Yahari Val Yavor. I have to sacrifice my life before I tie my shoes the wrong way. Okay, I didn't know what I was talking about. There's priorities. The halacha recognizes priorities. I want to give you an example. The groom on his wedding night, the chassan, his wedding night. We have a mitzvah of saying the Shema every morning and every night. The groom on his wedding night has a special dispensation. He is exempt from saying the Shema. Exempt from saying the Shema? Whoever came up with such a thing? Exempt from the Shema? It's not like it's terribly hard either. It's the Shema. Usually when I'm saying it, I'm like falling asleep anyways. I'm not even sure if I complete it sometimes. Shema, I'm hitting the pillow. Okay? Shema. Where does it get this exemption? There's a disagreement in the Gemara. Rava, one of the great rabbis, his opinion is that the reason that he is exempt from saying the Shema is because he is already involved in another mitzvah, and that is consummating the marriage in the bedroom. So if you're involved in one mitzvah, in certain cases, you are exempt from another mitzvah. Okay? He's focusing on the mitzvah of consummating the marriage. Abaye says something very interesting. He says, no, that's not what's going on here. He's worried. He's terrified. This is his first time. Up until this point, he's never even been with someone. This is his first time. He's terrified. And because of his anxiety, he's not going to be able to say the Shema properly. And so the rabbis say, you're exempt. Unbelievable. he's got some anxiety. Well, it's probably not some. He's got anxiety. Okay? And we forgot to talk about performance anxiety. That's a whole other topic. It's many different areas. It's honestly. He's exempt. His anxiety exempts him. A Torah law, the Shema, how hard is it? Exempt. We don't light fires on Shabbos. Except there are times we do light fires on Shabbos. Okay? The halacha stipulates that if somebody is sick, then he is exempt, you're able to light a fire for him to make him feel comfortable. Okay? Lift up his spirits. What if he's blind? He's not going to see the light anyways. He's blind, he can't see in light. The halacha says, you can light a candle for him too on Shabbos. Why? Just to settle his mind. He can't even see the light. You light the candle for him just to settle his anxiety. There is another area, I'll say very quickly, this is not for any kind of legal determination at this point, but it's an interesting concept. Whether a doctor can reveal to their patient the full extent of their illness or related illness, if that's going to cause undue anxiety and actually bring about a higher chance of mortality. It's a very, very, very interesting topic. Can a doctor reveal to his patient the full extent of his diagnosis if it's going to cause harm? It's going to cause harm. So, let's talk about some solutions. One is a balanced life. You've got to have some balance in your life. You've got to know how to prioritize. You've got to know what to give up and not to give up. How are we doing on time? Good? Okay. What to give up, what not to give up. Meditation. You have to have healthy outlets. Therapy. Group therapy is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way to deal with anxiety. I remember I had a client once, it's called Work in a Program. He was going to 12-step meetings and doing the work. He was an addict, doing, a meeting every day, 2 meetings every day, and he kept on relapsing. And I said, you gotta relax. You're gonna need some balance in your life. I was probably one of the few people telling him to stop going to so many meetings, stop calling everybody, just chill. And he did. And as far as I know, he's sober to this day. So we need to have solutions. Because one of the places that anxiety leads to is anger. So that's a good segue. Let's talk about anger. The prevalence of anger. It's very hard to find studies on this because anger is very underdiagnosed. Very underdiagnosed. But any therapist, and probably anecdotally in your own lives, you realize anger is a big problem, whether it's on the road or in many, many different settings. Like I said before, it is higher in men. Usually, anger does not fit into the typical diagnostic categories, so it's harder to find healthcare providers who are willing to treat it.
Really?
Sorry?
I say really?
Yeah, really. That's a whole other subject. The anxiety of our healthcare industry. Anyone ever heard of Rageaholics Anonymous? Yeah, anyone? 12-step program for ragers. Raging is a very big high for people, right? Tremendous control. I'm God. Tremendous sense of power. People actually create situations unbeknownst to them where they can actually rage. It's incredible. It's only by the way, the meetings take place only in 3 states. Would anybody want to venture a guess what 3 states they are? Anyone? New York? South Florida, I-95, yeah, when?
I-95, yeah.
Anyway.
It's one place.
So this will knock your socks off. Missouri, North Carolina, and maybe not surprisingly, Washington, D.C. Okay, so now you know what states to avoid on the road, anywhere else. Interesting. But they do have plenty of phone meetings, and I hope that they're very well populated because it is a very, very prevalent problem. Contributing factors to anger. Anger is typically considered what's called a secondary emotion. There are underlying reasons for anger. It doesn't come about for no reason. It really doesn't. It's true. There are underlying reasons. One of the more typical ones is low self-esteem. Okay? Low self-esteem is extremely, extremely prevalent in our society, in Western culture. Extremely, extremely prevalent. Again, that's a subject matter for a different time. It requires so many hours to give it justice, but it's one of the very big contributors to anger. Another one is it's natural. It's a response to threat, to fear. People who deal with PTSD, okay?
What's PTSD?
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? It's when something traumatic happens and it continues to mess with your life in the present. Something happened in the past, it's not in the past. It's affecting your life right now. That's what trauma is. And people get angry. You know, there's an expression, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. Hurt people, hurt people. Hurt people, hurt people. People who are in tremendous pain, and there's a lot of pain out there. It's a lot of pain. They hurt people. Anger can be contributed by biological factors. Endocrinological. It's too late for me to say that properly. A pituitary imbalance, diabetes, low blood sugars, high blood sugars. Okay, so it can have some biological factors. And the consequences, I couldn't even fit them on the card. Okay, the consequences are so many. But I want to just talk about two, which I hope impact you. They certainly impact me, and you know when I really think about this. One is the shame. You know, most people, by and large, are moral people. Okay, and when we rage and we get angry and we destroy things, relationships, you know, we're left with tremendous shame, feeling like you're worthless, and that just fuels more of the anger. So it's a terrible, terrible cycle. Terrible cycle. I remember I was running a group once, and someone was describing how his girlfriend had thrown a Yankee candle at him. You know, one of the other group members wanted to know what flavor it was because if it was vanilla, he was going to get angry. You should not be throwing vanilla. That's evidently that's one of the Yankee flavors that should not take flight. Okay, but the other effect is it has a generational effect. You know, children who grow up in families where there's constant raging. Not the only reason why they may be angry. It's other emotional dysregulation, biological, other factors, environmental, but it has a generational effect from one generation to the next. There are different types of anger. One is sort of the constantly angry person. Things are never going his way. He is just. I had one client come into me once. He said, "I'm just one angry dude." I mean, that kind of like described him. He was one angry dude. I'm grateful he wasn't a few angry dudes because he was a little bit much. You know, he was very, very angry, and he had cause to be. But our sages compare that person to someone who's an idolater. Okay, someone who's an idolater, because someone who's an idolater is playing God. They're playing God. And when someone's angry, the whole world has to conform to what they want. What they want. Then there's the other kind, I call him the simmerer. He's just simmering with anger. You know, it's the resentful kind, the passive-aggressive kind. He causes more harm to himself than to others. Some halacha considerations with regards to anger. The halacha dictates that you are not allowed to appease somebody when they're red hot in their anger. The Chumash itself says, "Lo sisna achicha bilvavecha." You are not allowed to hate somebody in your heart. How do you not hate somebody in your heart? It's out of your control sometimes. You have to take actions that will hopefully. We're not in control of our emotions all the time, but we can take certain actions that can alleviate that, hopefully. Okay, some possible solutions. So one is Pirkei Avos, Ezu Chacham. Who is the wise person? Aryeh es hanoilad, the person who can anticipate what's going to happen. I'll tell you a personal story. In my household, between the hours of 4 p.m. and maybe 12 p.m., that's the witching hour. Everything goes crazy. The dishes and the kids and the washing and the hair drying and it's you know. And it's hard to walk into a situation like that. And I used to walk into situations like that, and it's overwhelming, and you know we become very reactive. So what I discovered was I do some scouting. Okay, I'll call my wife beforehand. You know, I say, "Shari, what's the lay of the land? What's the where's the war going on over here? What's happening?" So that when I come in, there's an expression from the Bible, girded for war. I'm already sort of like armored. I'm prepared. I'm not being reactive. And there are many situations where we know in advance. We know in advance what's going to happen. Doesn't always take such a wise person. Just enough experience. Educate ourselves. I want to quote for you something that the Ali Shor, a wonderful sefer on ethics, a contemporary sefer, he says the following: you must study the subject of anger. You must study it and look at it introspectively. Because if you do not, he guarantees that you're going to explode. Guaranteed. It's going to build up and eventually it's going to erupt. So you have to deal with the underlying issues. Some solutions to anger. Another one, expressing it. By the way, this is where therapy can be extremely important. Okay? There are not many places where you can fully express your anger. How many places can you just scream and someone be okay with that? I remember it wasn't too long ago. I had a girl in my office and she had relationship issues, and she kind of experienced in the therapy that she was going to have to let go of these things, and she felt I was like taking her life away. That's what it felt like to her, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. Thank God. Thank God. There was someone where she could be herself with. Not many people can do that. Doesn't usually happen with family, rarely with friends. Some place where she can just be, authentically her. We have to have places for that. There are grounding skills. We can practice acceptance, which is a very spiritual and a wonderful way to deal with anger. Grounding, again, individual and group therapy are wonderful places to work on anger. Lastly, we turn to addiction. The Journal of Evaluations in Health Professionals, which is a very reputable peer-reviewed journal, estimates that perhaps 47% of the population suffer from some kind of maladaptive signs of an addictive disorder. That's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And I'm not going to talk about the opioid crisis. I'm not going to talk about marijuana, whether that's a drug or not. I'm not going to talk about cocaine or heroin or gambling or eating disorders or sex addiction or any of a number of video games. That was just put into the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Video games. I had a client, his father turned off his video games, he broke his jaw. He hadn't slept for several days, he hadn't washed, hadn't bathed. It's real. It's real. It's a big stimulation. It's an incredible way to avoid life. Just go into the virtual life. And I won't talk about the specific addictions truly because they're all the same. Because I want to explain what addiction is. The definition of addiction, I have friends, and I'm not a big drinker. I can't, pack it away. But I know people who can pack it away. Okay, they're typically Hasidim, and they do a wonderful job of really packing it away. But they're not addicts. Why? Because if you're an addict, you can check off two things: you're powerless over, you can't stop, you can't put it down for any length of time, and your life is going in the trash bin because of it. They can put it down. Their life is not everyone. If they can't, you're probably an addict. Okay. What is addiction? People have it all wrong. People think, and this is very shocking, even to addicts that I speak to, they think the problem is drugs. They think the problem is drinks. They think the problem is gambling. They think the problem is this, the problem is that. It's not. It's not the problem at all. It's a solution. It's a solution. When the addict is depressed, they have a solution. And it works. They drink, they drug, whatever they do. When the addict is anxious, they turn to drink and drug. It works. It's effective. When they're lonely, they feel no one cares about them. It's a terrible, dreadful feeling. They have a solution. Drink and drug. Or anything else. When they're successful, things are going really well, what's the biggest problem then? How do I celebrate? I know how to celebrate. Smoke a blunt, drink a fifth. It works. The problem is it's a very effective solution. What's the problem? Many underlying issues. The problem is life. The problem is life. As one fellow told me, it can be a nasty four-letter word. Life. And so Alex and I understood, the public doesn't understand them, they themselves don't understand them. But it's marked by a certain kind of inability to see reality, and listen to the key words here, even when they're sober. Don't forget, every relapse happens when they're sober. Every time someone goes back out, drinks again, smokes again, snorts again, does whatever again, they do it when they're sober. So there's something about the sober mind that just doesn't quite connect with reality. That's very important because the truth is it never had anything to do with the drugs anyways. The problem was never it. The problem was life and the inability to deal with it. The obsession of the mind, an allergy of the body. Solutions. 12 steps of recovery, refuge recovery. Why? It addresses core fundamental beliefs which are erroneous and destructive. Meetings. Community. Thank God we have a community right here. They need a community too. Actually, the truth is every human being needs a community. Psychotherapy. A lot of addicts, even if they do meetings, even if they do 12 steps, they've got trauma that is just unavoidable. They can't deal with it. You know, when I deal with clients, I'll ask them, you know, they get sober, and I say, are you experiencing traumatic symptoms? Are you getting the night terrors again? Paralysis? Is your trauma coming back? Yes. Well, do you know why? No. It's really simple. The drugs worked. The drugs worked. No trauma. Now you're not taking your medicine. Trauma comes back. An addiction is an enslavement. 1 out of every 5 Jews, chamushim olu, 1 out of every 5 Jews left Egypt. Why? Because they were enslaved mentally. A few years ago, I asked my son, I said, what do you think about Shabbos? Yeah, I remember we were living in Houston at the time, and I asked him, Kiva, what do you think about Shabbos? I love Shabbos. What do you think about Shabbos? I feel free. All the rest of the week, I don't play that many video games, but I kind of feel like I have to do this, I have to do that. Shabbos? I don't have to. I'm a free man. My son got it. He got it. Okay, we talked a little bit about the problems. I want to talk about what do we do? Okay, we'll spend another maybe 5 or so minutes just talking about what do we do? What can we do here? I hope that you didn't just come here to learn. Honestly, I hope that you did learn something. I hope I was able to impart something to you. But learning is not enough. This is a call to action. We have to take action. The question is, what kind of actions do we take? It is not simply enough to learn. We have to act. I remember my first Gemara Rabbi in Yeshiva, I loved him very, very much. He was from Europe, really old school, very thick European accent. And I remember I was asking once about battered women in the Jewish community. And he said, the Frechnish kan kashes. Frechnish kan kashes. In Yiddish, that means, don't ask too many questions. Just sweep it under the rug. That's how things were done with then. And understandably, they had a legitimate fear that there was going to be persecution if too much of our dirty laundry got aired. But now we got to ask the questions. We have to ask the questions. If we don't always have answers, we still have to ask the questions. And we have to care very, very deeply. I want to share with you a verse in Mishlei, Proverbs. Daga b'lavish yisichena. Worry, anxiety in the heart of man, okay? You should quash it. Rabbi Yami, Rabbi Asi, Chadamar Yisichena. Midaito, he should quash it out of his mind. But on a play on words, the other rabbi says, Yisichenam le'acherim. You should discuss it with somebody else. Okay? We need to discuss it with somebody else. If you have the problem, discuss it. If you don't have the problem, your friends do. You got to get to know them. You got to be a good chaver. The Be'er Mayim Chaim, Reb Chaim of Chernovitz, one of the great classic works on Hasidim, says the following: Dagab lavish yisichena. Worry in a man's heart, he should discuss. Ve'amru Chazal yisichena la'achirim ki shayagid ha'odem sarasu v'dagasu ashabil vavo. When a person discusses the concern, the worry, the anxiety in his heart with somebody else, and he gets it out there, Yakil hadaga min halev. You get relief. You find relief. If it stays in you, beware. So much so that God himself, Hashem, consulted Moshe Rabbeinu when he was angry. He asked him for Eitzah. Moses gave God some advice. God talked it out with Moses. Obviously, God does not need Moses' help, but to demonstrate to us what we need to do. The Peleiotes, Eliezer Papa, who lived in Bulgaria in the early 1800s, wrote a wonderful book on Jewish ethics. It says the following: you need both of these things. You need to quash it, but if that doesn't work, you have to talk about it. First, you should try to quash it on your own if you can. If you can't, you should talk about others. Dahainu, who should you talk to about? Who should you talk with? Talmidei Chachamim, Anshei Mada, Sheyedo Lesaknoi, Be'etzah Toiva. People who know what they're talking about. People who are wise. I encourage you, if you have anxiety, go to your rabbis. If they're not equipped to deal with it, direct them to therapists. Talk to people who know what they're talking about. You should talk to your friends. It'll make even better friends. Okay? It'll make even better friends. But we're not all equipped to deal with it. Take them to the specialist. Rabbi Bar Abba, this is in the Maseches Brachos, in the Talmud of Brachos. Rabbi Bar Abba, he got sick. So Rabbi Yochanan came to visit him. He says, you like your suffering so much? What do you think? You like your suffering? He says, I don't want the suffering, I want the reward. So his friend says, Rabbi Yochanan says, give me your hand. Take my hand. And he stood up and he stopped suffering. Then it happened that Rabbi Yochanan got sick. And Rabbi Chanina came to visit him. And he offered the same counsel. The Talmud asked if he knew how to heal himself, why did somebody else have to help him? The Gemara says something beautiful. A prisoner cannot free himself from his own prisoner. We need help. That's right. That's absolutely right. So, just to conclude, there is a verse in Vayikra. It says, Lo sa'moid Adam Rageah, you shall not stand by the blood of your friend. According to one commentary, Dam Rageah, you shall not stand silent. Dom also means silent. You shall not stand idly by. We have to be proactive. Shavuos is approaching. It's the holiday of unity. Nasev and Nishma. We become one body. One whole body. We set things together. Unity. Today we're celebrating the end of conflict. The end of this Lag BaOmer. Unity. If my left hand has a problem, doesn't the body feel it? Doesn't the whole body feel it? The right hand doesn't say, oh, okay, take care of yourself. No. The whole body schleps the left hand along and takes it to the doctor. We're one body. And we've got more than a problem with our hand. The prevalence, and by the way, in the Jewish community, it's not any less than it is in other communities. It's a very big problem. I hope that this does become a call to action. We have to not just learn, we have to experience what it is to be a friend, experience what it is to actually help people, to put yourself out there. And I want to end with a bracha, a blessing. We should all merit to be the community, to have the courage. Courage is in short supply. We should all merit to be the community that God wants us to be, that Hashem wants us to be. He charges us to be that way. May we all have a refuas haguf, a healing of the body, refuas hanefesh, and healing of the soul. Thank you very much.